Hello everybody and welcome to the Group B portion of this Legends of Runeterra Invitational. My name is Boulevard, going to be bringing you the English cast here today. Getting us started off here in match number 1, we have ShangHigh on Teemo Burn, Teemo Draven that is, with a lot of direct damage coming out of this deck, just not only in the unit lineup with things like this Legion Saboteur and Boom Crew Rookie, but also 3 Decimate in the main deck. Boom Crew Rookie, a card that we saw come up big for some players yesterday and some not so great. And then over on the side of Portia, we have this Fiora Z elusive buff deck, sort of reminiscent of the old Fiora Karma deck, where the general strategy is to get out one unit and buff it up really big. The Kenku Lifeblade nerfs did hurt this deck a little bit, that unit becoming a little bit more vulnerable to removal. However, a Kenku Lifeblade that gets standalone can still solo win one of these aggro matchups. Now, no turn 1 play going to come out on the side of Portia. ShangHigh going to be able to get a Boom Crew Rookie down next turn and push through a decent amount of damage early on. All of this direct damage going to be adding up, as there is no Kenku Lifeblade yet on the side of Portia, that and Spirit's Refuge being the only forms of healing in this deck, so a stagnant life total until he can find one of those cards. No health potion or anything like that coming in here, generally only seen in Karma decks. And now Portia contemplating this Green Glade duo, perhaps a Key Guardian onto the Fiora for a easy setup next turn onto eating a unit. But it looks like the Green Glade duo is going to be the decision here. Could actually block this Legion Saboteur, a trade that both players are probably relatively okay with. My personal opinion, ShangHigh getting the better of this trade here, as the Sabotage ability does come through. Your 1-drop pushes 1 damage and eats a 2-drop. That's a pretty good trade, one that most aggro players are happy to take. But this Zed coming down on the side of Portia could spell disaster for him here if he just walks into this Mystic Shot, as a Legion Rearguard will get developed alongside it. Push through another 6 damage potentially, unless a Radiant Strike can come off the top here, but it's a riposte, which means Fiora could be the play here. Challenge the Boom Crew Rookie and be able to deal with it again when it attacks. However, that Mystic Shot going to be just as valuable here against this Fiora. Might even get it down after the attack on the Boom Crew Rookie. Or play a Legion Rearguard, hoping to get the Fiora for free on a minion that cannot block, or on a unit that cannot block, rather. Legion Rearguard hover coming in for ShangHigh, contemplating the options. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to just pass, as it's pretty likely that Portia will attack with this Fiora. However, there's always the mind game aspect to it, and it is going to be the Legion Rearguard coming down, giving Fiora a juicy-looking target if they have a Radiant Strike, which we know Portia does not. We'll see. And Portia just going to pass, saying, you're going to have to develop more of a board than that if you want me to commit anything. And it looks like the second Boom Crew Rookie being hovered here for ShangHigh, saying, if you're not going to attack anything, then I'm going to push through at least 4 damage on this attack declaration. A Laurent Blade Keeper could come down onto this Fiora here if ShangHigh tries to play something before combat, and the Draven looking like a pretty good pickup to do exactly that. A lot of units in the hand for ShangHigh here. The 2 mana banked for this Mystic Shot going to come down for free, so this 4 mana is going to be freely spent on units here. Could be the Draven, could be the Chumpwump, could be both of the 2-drops. It all depends. There's not a lot that Portia can actually do with their mana. Now picking up the Radiant Strike gives them a few more options, as a blocker could be made out of this Laurent Blade Keeper. It looks like Draven will be the play here. A Spinning Axe going to hand. A Crimson Discipline. Crimson Discipline? Yes. Crimson Disciple. Crimson Disciple. I always get Disciple and Discipline confused. My apologies here. So a Crimson Disciple. Probably the worst card in the hand if this Spinning Axe does need to get played now. Obviously would like to save it for the Chumpwump and the Mushrooms. But a 5/5 Fiora going to be something that's a little awkward to attack into. However, the Mystic Shot does make it appealing, and this Spinning Axe does negate the Radiant Strike onto this Fiora if Portia goes for a block and ShangHigh goes for the Mystic Shot. This is going to push through at least 2 damage. It's going to be the Laurent Blade Keeper. Blocking onto this Legion Rearguard does have to consider the ramifications of something like a Brother's Bond here. which, interestingly enough, no Brothers Bond in ShangHigh's list. Spell lineup, 3 Blade's Edge though, a couple of Rummage, some Mystic Shot, Get Excited, 1 Might, and of course 3 Decimate. Gonna be a lot of over-the-top burn damage, and still no life gain picked up on the side of Portia, as that is a Riposte and not a Spirit Blade. Looks like these blocks are going to be how Portia has decided to line things up, and ShangHigh gonna say, I'm okay with that. Gonna get a relatively free trade onto this Laurent Bladekeeper here. However, Fiora survives, and Draven gonna be vulnerable on this attack from this Fiora. 11, a relatively healthy life total going into turn 5. Turn 6 is the earliest we have seen players starting to die to these Piltovers on Noxus decks this tournament so far. So a rather slow start on the side of ShangHigh. No Jinx in this deck either, despite using the Jinx board. And this will upgrade the Fiora. ShangHigh considering going for a Spinning Axe here to force out a combat trick from Portia. Spinning Axe. Could discard the Spinning Axe. Unfortunately, when it's all said and done, a Mystic Shot on the barrier will not be enough, as there is still a Radiant Strike in the deck. It could also just be the Twin Disciplines coming out here, not playing any games on the side of this Fiora. We shall see. There's a lot of options for how Portia wants to respond to this. It looks like Radiant Strike will be the first one. Or not. Gonna put that one back. Put that thought away. There are no more Spinning Axes in the hand of ShangHigh, so a relatively safe bet that there isn't a whole lot more pump spells. However, because of how slowly ShangHigh's been playing this one, it's probably a read for more spells in hand than units, as he has not been putting those down as effectively as he could have, floating the 2 mana on the turn that the Fiora came down. And it looks like Riposte will be the answer here from Portia. Going to put this up to an 8-4 with Barrier, which will probably get the Mystic Shot, as it is the most effective way to deal with this Fiora. An upgraded 6-5 Fiora, definitely not something you want to be staring down as an aggro deck with no units on board at present. No Judgment in this deck out of Portia, however the Fiora can just win the old-fashioned way by beating up 4 guys. Looks like Radiant Strike will be the answer here. This will at least get this Fiora down to a manageable life total. However, the Twin Disciplines can heal it up at any moment. Looks like that is going to be the Fiora upgrade, and another Spinning Axe picked up here by ShangHigh. I love these champion animations. Definitely spot-on job by the Legends of Runeterra development team. Absolutely love the way the champions evolve, except for Teemo. His is a little underwhelming, as he just kind of trots in a circle and then gets back down. Heimerdinger is the deck that I had played the most, and he has very hype animation for the upgrade. The wrenches everywhere and all that. It always feels really good. Fiora, of course, doing the same, dancing around the battlefield. And now settling out at a 6-2 with ShangHigh on the aggressor. On the aggressive now, rather. He is the aggressor, he is not on the aggressor. That is how the English language works, and a lot of units that could be played pre-combat here. No Judgment consideration on the side of ShangHigh, as there is only 7 mana from Portia. Not that there is a Judgment in this deck, but something that ShangHigh might have to consider, especially with this Fiora so close to winning the game. If he can find a way to give it Barrier as well, this single combat could end the game if a Boom Crew rookie were to come down, as it would leave this Fiora at 1 HP. Unless the Spinning Axe were to come down, but those are considerations for a later turn. For now, we're just going to get the Chumpwump and Legion Grenadier. Portia trying to decide if it's worth it to play the Zed, maybe Key Guardian the Zed first, as he does have 2 in his hand, and Shadow Shift, not the most useful spell for the kinds of decks that Zed is generally played in. Looks like it will just be a naked Zed, no Key Guardian coming down on this, wanting to preserve the mana for something like a Twin Disciplines or a Shadow Shift. Now, ShangHigh thinking very carefully about the attacks, trying to think of what he wants to put down with this. Could be a Draven, could be a Boom Crew rookie, Twin Discipline, or Crimson Disciple rather. Wouldn't be the worst in the world, as it does contest the board as is, being a 2-3. Running out of time is ShangHigh, has to make a decision on what is going to be played. Looks like torn between this Boom Crew rookie and Draven, does end up going for the Draven. He's going to get a second spinning axe into his hand with these two mushrooms. That's some pretty easy discards. And as previously stated, despite the Jinx board, no Jinxes in the deck for ShangHigh. This is a Teemo Draven aggro deck, which, funny enough, we've seen quite a few Teemo aggro decks over the course of this tournament have yet to actually see a Teemo come down and get the value of the mushrooms into the deck. And that's going to be a pass from Portia over to ShangHigh, trying to figure out the most optimal attacks in this situation. Does have the two spinning axes, which would get this Draven through anything, as Twin Discipline's only going to buff something up to 5 health on the side of Portia. Two spinning axes going to be more than enough for that. So this game almost swinging back in ShangHigh's favor, depending on how these blocks shape up. It is not lethal damage. However, Legion Grenadier dying would make it lethal at a later date if Portia goes unblocked, but he has decided to line up the Zed onto this Legion Grenadier. Could play the Shadow Shift on the Zed, although it wouldn't make a lot of sense, as it would probably just be easier to play the second Zed after this Zed dies. No reason to get fancy with it when you suddenly no longer have a unit on board that you could have just played again from hand. And it looks like the single combat getting lined up for Portia here, potentially going to throw this Zed at the Draven, as well as blocking the 4 damage from this Chump Womp. And that is going to be the play. No way to protect the Draven here on the side of ShangHigh. Not a lot of defense buffs coming out of Noxus Piltover. And this will knock Portia down to 8. A still rather manageable life total. Potentially considering throwing a couple of spinning axes down to push through as much damage as possible. Getting Portia down to 6 would make this Legion Grenadier put him down to 4 when he dies, which would make a top deck Decimate lethal. And looking at this Fiora Zed deck, there are 2 Deny in the main. No Allegiance effects from Ionia or Demacia coming out, so a healthy mix of the 2 regions represented within this deck. 21 Ionia cards and 19 Demacia. So the 2 Deny, definitely a consideration for something like a Decimate. And it will be the 1 Spinning Axe coming out, as another one will be picked up here when Draven strikes the Zed. And the Chump Womp surviving. The Spinning Axe going to let this Chump Womp trade with this Fiora if a Twin Discipline does come out for it. Considering throwing a Mushroom into the deck of Portia here, there is not a whole lot of discard effects left. Might be worth it with your opponent falling so low. They're effectively at 5 life currently, thanks to the Legion Grenadier. Anytime that dies, will just be 2 damage knocked off the life total of Portia. With all of the burns still to be found in the deck of ShangHigh, still 3 Mystic Shot, 3 Get Excited, and 3 Decimate. Shrooms could do a little bit of work, but do you really want to place your fate in the hands of this Mushroom RNG? It looks like the answer for ShangHigh is no right now, and a Kinku Lifeblade off the top going to be matched by a Decimate. This Kinku Lifeblade could be the swing that ShangHigh needs, or Portia needs rather, to get back in this game, and getting it on a turn with the attack token, going to be able to get some immediate value out of it, buff him back up to 9, and it will be the Key Guardian on it as well to protect it from any Mystic Shots or Get Exciteds, so that it can come down and freely get that 2 life. Looks like a change of plans from Portia here, not going to play this Kinku Lifeblade to attack with it. Instead, just going to line up this Fiora onto the Legion Grenadier and use a Twin Discipline to get the buff off onto it. That will put Fiora at 3 kills this game, which is just 1 off of lethal. And with a second Twin Discipline in hand, if this Chump Womp goes for an attack, the Spinning Axe will actually protect it from this Fiora, as Fiora will take this damage, go down to a 6-2, and then a Twin Discipline puts it back at a 6-5. And therefore, Chump Womp with a Spinning Axe would actually trade onto it, and Fiora does need to survive the battle in order to get her 4th proc and win the game. So ShangHigh just going to say okay to that. Going to put Portia down to 5 with this Decimate. Might as well be at 1. which means a Boom Crew Rookie and a Decimate could be the play here, which would be lethal, having to consider this deny out of Portia potentially. No deny in hand though, so if ShangHigh does want to go for this Boom Crew Rookie play and the Decimate, it could pay off huge. The concern being that a deny on the Boom Crew Rookie's Undertow ability would actually let the Boom Crew Rookie get blocked by the Fiora and be lethal damage, or a lethal attack rather, I guess. It's a lethal attack on the side of Portia, even though the attack is made by ShangHigh, as the evolution of the Fiora would go through and win the game. However, he can line up around that by putting the Boom Crew Rookie all the way to the right and potentially killing Portia before that attack actually goes through. And it will be the mushrooms coming down now, saying, I will now put my fate in the hands of this RNG. There is a 10 shrooms in deck with 28, so that is about a 30% chance for ShangHigh to just win the game here. And you hate to see it, but whoa, 4 mushrooms off the top from Portia. A little overkill there on the side of ShangHigh. And that's going to be all she wrote for game number 1. Game number 2 here of Portia versus ShangHigh. ShangHigh taking game number 1 with his Teemo Draven deck, going to be switching over to his Harrowing Ashe. And Portia also electing to switch decks, going to this Shadow Isle Noxus deck. Now, this is not a traditional Spider build. This is just a fearsome Noxus deck with a couple copies of Culling Strike and Legion Rearguard to sort of round out some of the proposed weaknesses of the deck. Legion Rearguard, definitely one of the best 1-mana units in the game, and generally not having a 1-mana play is the fearsome decks, just always passing that turn, getting to bank 2 spell mana on 3 as they play a slew of 2-drops, but not ShangHigh's plan here, or Portia's plan rather, as it does have those 1-drops in the deck. So going to be an aggressive opener from ShangHigh, as he does have this Arachnid Horror, and nothing from the hand of Portia can contest that. The Wraithcaller, the first one coming down being a 2-2, the second one will be a 3-2, but first one not going to be able to block this Arachnid Horror. Looks like Portia will be falling down to 17 here. Ashe in hand already for ShangHigh. The only target in this deck for the Babbling Berg. Portia contemplating if it's worth getting down this Mistwraith. Would be a little surprised to see nothing come out. Could go for a Vile Feast play, although it seems rather unlikely. And will just be the Mistwraith coming down for Portia. Not going to be able to contest this Arachnid Horror though, as the Fearsome is a powerful ability, especially on these early game minions. Will be a Glimpse Beyond picked up on the side of ShangHigh, and a Rekindler for Portia. No champions having died yet, so that Chronicler of Ruin and Rekindler looking real juicy if a Hecarim can be found. However, with this aggressive start from ShangHigh, that might not be viable to wait around for a Hecarim to come down and die, get brought back by this Rekindler, but it is going to be a block from the Arachnid Horror, trading onto this Mistwraith. No turn 3 unit from either player. It's going to be a couple of passes, everybody banking up the 3 spell mana. And then with the attack token on 4 for ShangHigh, it will almost certainly be an Ashe coming down, which will then almost certainly get blocked by this Mistwraith in combination with a Vile Feast. The Wraithcaller coming down. And a big whiff from Portia. Extremely surprising, actually, as he did just draw a Noxus card, which very, very unfortunate. You definitely think with only 4 Noxus cards in the deck, you draw 1 and you're definitely safe to get this Wraithcaller down, but not the case here. An extremely unfortunate swing of RNG for Portia, as now this Ashe is going to live. Could block with the Wraithcaller and Black Spear, but definitely not as clean as just blocking with the Mistwraith that comes down. Would be a 3-2 since one was played earlier. Misspoke earlier when I was talking about the Vile Feast trade. It would just get a clean trade onto the Mistwraith, but now pushing through 5 damage, which means there is a Legion Rearguard or a second Culling Strike on top of the deck for Portia. And it is the Legion Rearguard. Omen Hawk picked up for ShangHigh. Will be a Chronicler on the Wraithcaller. Not going to miss this time, as there are only 2 Noxus cards left in the deck. That would have been a huge, huge swing for ShangHigh, and a very, very unfortunate luck on the side of Portia. However, not getting unlucky a second time, only missing one Mistwraith. This obviously would be a totally different game if that Mistwraith had come down for Portia. This is why we saw players running Mono Shadow Isle yesterday, not wanting to take any risks and never losing these Wraithcallers. It is the risk you run when you include these other factions into your deck. Legion Rearguard and Calling Strike is worth the potential whiff in the mind of Portia, and that's showing up here. Will just be a slew of attacks on the side of Portia with this everything trading into the board. There's a Flash Freeze Ashe in the hand of ShangHigh, as Babbling Berg can only get Ashe, and with an Ashe on board, that's what it is going to turn into. Let's see if a freeze effect does come down here. Would be a little surprising, as there is still Black Spears to be played on the side of both players. So a consideration and Flash Freeze would take away the Glimpse Beyond mana. Might still be worth it in the eyes of ShangHigh to trade a minion and a free Ashe for a Black Spear. And it will be the Bjerg down onto the Wraithcaller, and that's going to be all she wrote in terms of blocks here. Going to be 6 damage, probably pushed through for Portia. No Overwhelm on the Wraithcaller, so this Calling Strike would be a little bit weird, in my opinion, in response to the block. Portia just contemplating if there's anything else that he wants to play. And the Calling Strike might actually come down just to protect his board. Yeah, it is just going to be the Calling Strike onto the Babbling Bjerg. Going straight to combat instead of playing the Legion Rearguard, saying I don't want something like an Omen Hawk coming down to block that as well, and I just want to protect my board as much as possible. This is going to get met with a Glimpse Beyond on the side of ShangHigh. Still only 6 damage coming through, as there is a Shadow Block mechanic in Legends of Runeterra. Will be a second Vile Feast and a Brittle Steel. Some decent pickups. Doesn't really have the board to take advantage of these freeze effects in terms of trading effectively, but does have a Black Spear, and no Black Spear mana on the side of Portia will mean that this is a relatively free shoot onto this Wraithcaller. Card advantage and life advantage on the side of ShangHigh. However, one Hecarim could swing everything around, as the Rekindler is already in the hand, and an Elise coming down, the wrong champion. Sorry, I jinxed it for you there, Portia. I apologize, as that is not a Hecarim, that is just a lowly Elise. And ShangHigh doing the math on the attacks, realizing this will freeze a Chronicler of Ruin, and deciding if a freeze effect onto this Wraithcaller would be worth it, or this Mistwraith rather. So many cards with so many similar names here in Legends of Runeterra. I misspeak from time to time. I apologize for that. Considering the Arachnid Horror, considering just going to combat, it will be the Arachnid Horror coming down, almost certainly going to be met with some resistance on the side of ShangHigh, or on the side of Portia rather. Not a lot of resistance to be offered though. Elise, the only actual blocker, could play a Rekindler, but playing that with the Elise still in hand seems a little bit awkward. A 6 mana 4/4, definitely not the kind of card you want to be playing. A lot better when it revives a champion. Definitely a threatening stat line for it as well. Definitely feels good when it feels good. Unfortunately, this situation, feeling pretty bad, is the Rekindler. At least for the time being. Definitely set up for success rather. Sorry, set up for success is the Rekindler in these next couple of turns, and Portia going to elect to play nothing. Is going to be a pretty easy set of attacks here for ShangHigh. The Ashe and Arachnid Horror both coming down. That Chronicler of Ruin cannot block the Arachnid Horror, and the Mistwraith going to go onto the Ashe. Probably going to get a Brittle Steel here. And there is still the second Ashe in the hand of ShangHigh. No Harrowing picked up by either player yet. And one of the concerns with this Ashe deck is that even though your opponent isn't running any Ashes of their own, if enough of yours die, their harrowing will just kill you, as their Ashes will upgrade on attack if there are enough of them, make it so that your board is unblockable. Obviously 5 Ashes need to die for that to happen, or multiple harrowings need to come down. Will be a glimpse beyond onto this Mist Wraith in response to the Brittle Seal. The 5 damage going to be blocked either way. It is going to be 3 damage coming through onto the side of Portia, going to be 14-9 when all is said and done. Okay, button digging for a Hecarim, still going to be a Frenzied Skitterer, and another Glimpse Beyond. Definitely not what you want to see if you're a Portia fan. Definitely want to see this Hecarim coming down pretty soon. 28 cards left in the deck, 3 Hecarim in there. And it's going to be the Black Spear onto the Ashe. Is it going to be Banked Spell Mana, or are we going to Glimpse Beyond? Looks like it will be the Glimpse Beyond onto the Ashe. Going to draw a couple more cards for ShangHigh. Really even up the card advantage here. And a Rekindler and a Babbling Beard. Those are pretty good pickups. If ShangHigh wants, he can play this Ashe and follow it up with a Rekindler to get 2 Ashes on board, or could play the Rekindler to turn that Ashe back into a Flash Freeze. And this game looking to be heavily in the favor of ShangHigh at the moment. However, at any given moment, a Hecarim can come down and swing the momentum in a big way. Frostbite effects not particularly useful against the powerful Horseman, as he does still create 6 damage worth of Spectral Riders. And the Omen Hawk going to come down on the side of ShangHigh, saying, I don't really care about banking a lot of spell mana this turn. Looks like Legion Rearguard going to be the response from Portia, as he is on the offensive next turn. Finally getting that down. Could even see the Elise come down as well. And there it will go, actually. The Elise coming down. A rather large board on the side of Portia. This Elise nowhere near upgrading, but not really the intended purpose of it. And a Frenzied Skitterer could actually push a lot of damage, but no, just going to go straight for the attacks. A couple of 3 attack minions, and 2 and a 1. Going to be pushing 9 potential damage, if no blocks are declared. Still 2 Vile Feast on the side of ShangHigh, as well as a Harsh Winds if he wants to try and go for some favorable trades here. Although it would just be onto a 3 attack minion and a 1/1. So the Harsh Winds almost certainly not a consideration here. The block onto the 1/1. Not going for anything like a double Vile Feast onto this Legion Rearguard. Not wanting to get blown out by a Mark of the Isle or something like that. Another consideration, of course, would have been lining up the Omen Hawk onto this Legion Saboteur. Vile Feasting the Spiderling as well as this Legion Rearguard, but ShangHigh having other plans for his mana this turn. Going to get down this Elise and probably an Ashe as well. Just try and push through enough damage here. Ashe, I believe, on 3 freeze effects. Yep, 3 out of 5 on the Ashe. It's 2 Ashe attacks and a Brittle Steel, which means Harsh Winds will upgrade her, which could push through enough damage for the win here. Harsh Winds onto the Rekindler and the Elise would evolve the Ashe. Her attack would hit the Chronicler of Ruin, and that would be 10 damage coming through. It will be the Rekindler instead. This will also upgrade the Ashe. Not as many blockers taken off the board, though. And a Frenzied Skitterer coming down on the side of Portia. Going to reduce the amount of damage being taken in every capacity. A lot less attack now on the side, and more blockers to be had. The Legion Rearguard, not a consideration for blocking. Also the weakest unit, so definitely never going to get hit by this Ashe. ShangHigh still electing to swing out here. It's game number 2 of this Invitational. Up 1 game still. Looking to close out a second one here with a large attack and 2 upgraded Ashes. The Crystal Arrow actually going to be a very effective defensive tool here, as Portia does not currently have Hecarim, and a Hecarim off the top would just get Crystal Arrowed along with the entire board of Portia outside of this Rekindler. So 2 blockers on the side of Portia. Glimpse Beyond in hand along with a Vile Feast and Black Spear. Definitely some moves to be made. Not dead just yet. Looks like it will be blocks onto both of the Ashes, letting Portia survive at 3. No Mark of the Isles coming out of this Ashe harrowing deck. So the 3 going to be a pretty safe life total for the time being. This Harsh Winds being saved for a later date by Portia, or ShangHigh rather, showing some restraint, going for the rekindling play instead. Trying to push through more damage, and it is going to be both of the Elises going down here. 3 to 8 is the life total with a large board advantage on the side of ShangHigh. The Vile Feast going to come down onto presumably one of the Ashes. Makes the most sense. Could be a Black Spear onto the other Ashe as well, even followed up by a Glimpse Beyond potentially onto the Spiderling, just trying to find a Hecarim. ShangHigh hovering the Crawling Sensation, trying to consider having a board full of 1/1s, and evolving this Elise is the way that he wants to play this game. Will just be a pass, deciding not to evolve the Elise with the Elise in hand. Crawling Sensation, a relatively good card in this particular scenario, as there are a lot of blockable things on the side of Portia. No Fearsome, no Elusive, nothing like that. Chronicler of Ruin and Rekindler, very honest cards, going to get blocked out by these chump blockers that you include in your decks. And will be a Glimpse Beyond onto the Spiderling, going to get countered out by a Vile Feast. Good patience on the side of ShangHigh with these Vile Feasts, which is all but going to take Portia out of this game. Be a Black Spear onto the Ashe. It's up to a Hecarim top deck. The most powerful card. A Harrowing actually would also be a pretty good... Actually, Harrowing not a good pickup on the side of Portia, as he would not have the mana to play it. Banking no spell mana this turn means you have to play an honest game of 9 mana on turn 9. It will be the Elise Evolution coming down now on the side of ShangHigh. 4 1/1 Spiderlings. Nothing to sneeze at, as there is a restriction on this Legion Rearguard that says it can't block him. The Hecarim will finally come down, but in the face of this Enchanted Crystal Arrow, might not be enough. Harsh Winds as well. Some blocks could be declared on the side of ShangHigh to free up some board space, get this Babbling Beard down, and get the Ashe out of deck so that this Enchanted Crystal Arrow pushes through lethal. Instead, going to use it now as a defensive tool. Draw another Babbling Beard. This Harsh Wind's almost certainly going to be enough in combination with the Ashe anyway to push through lethal damage. And this one is looking like all she wrote in favor of ShangHigh, as long as some attacks do come through from Portia here. And if they don't, all of these 1/1 Spiderlings can just pull the Chronicler, Rekindler, and Hecarim to the side, make way for the Elise and the Rekindler on the side of ShangHigh, pushing through lethal damage. If Portia goes for some attacks, then these Babbling Beards get to come out, and another Ashe will come down on the side of ShangHigh, as long as he can free up enough board space by getting rid of 2 of these spiders. And the Skitterer are going to come down. That going to be turning off all of these Spiderlings for the time being. Going to be a pass from ShangHigh into the combat phase of Portia. The Frostbitten Hecarim still attacking as the Spectral Riders coming out. Not reflective of Hecarim's attack in any capacity, so the Frostbite ineffective here in terms of that. It's going to be a Rekindler block onto this Frenzied Skitterer. Debating the 1/1 blocks. It's going to be free damage onto that Hecarim with that Elise. And with no hand to have a Mark of the Isle in it, as well as no mana to play it, no fear of the surprise lethal coming out of Portia here is going to line up the blocks on these 2 Spiderlings, perhaps going for the Babbling Beard play onto the Ashe. Should still be 1 copy in deck. ShangHigh just running the math again, making sure that everything's going to work out the way that he wants it to. Once again, just running over everything, looking like he's mousing over his blockers and attackers for the next turn, trying to figure out how everything is going to work out to make sure, with 100% certainty, that his lethal attacks do come through. No Ruination on the side of either player, so not something you have to worry about. However, not totally sure if the players know that or not. So definitely something they could be playing around, which would make this Ashe a little scary. Still have the advantage as you have this Babbling Beard. However, that is the last Ashe in the deck, so that one will get nothing. And it will be the Vengeance coming down, actually. Off the top for Portia, probably the best top deck he could have hoped for, given the circumstances, although I'm not sure it's enough. Although, if ShangHigh goes straight to combat, it will actually be enough, as the spiders would pull the 3 blockers to the side, and then Rekindler and Babbling Beard swinging through. Babbling Beard would get vegeanced, or sorry, Rekindler would get vegeanced, Babbling Beard would get through, and leave Portia at 1, which would be enough to mount a comeback rather, but ShangHigh not falling for it, getting the Ashe down, and it looks like that is going to be a surrender on the side of Portia here in game number 2. ShangHigh leading 2-0. Game number 3 coming at you with ShangHigh versus Portia. Portia once again electing to switch decks, going for his Ezreal Elnuk combo deck. And, of course, ShangHigh winning game number 2 is going to be relegated to his last deck. This one, a Fiora Shen deck. This one containing the copies of Vanguard Bannerman, only running Shen and Greenglade Caretaker as the Ionia cards. Now, this troop of Elnuks we saw go huge for Gagongsing yesterday. Gonna see if Portia can get some similar RNG on his side. Meanwhile, couple of Greenglade Caretakers, or just a single Greenglade Caretaker rather, on the side of ShangHigh, something that we saw pay big dividends for Ghost in his game win against N3. It's going to be a second Greenglade Caretaker. Speak of the devil, thought I saw two, and here is the second one. Now, as far as matchups go, theoretically, the Ezreal combo deck has some tools to deal with these unit-based decks. That is generally what the deck was built for. These freeze effects, delay the early aggression, you can use removal spells on the things. Unfortunately, Vanguard Bannerman is a very effective tool for not dying to damage-based removal. So you're going to need to use your removal at kind of awkward times sometimes, and this Static Shock not going to get a whole lot of value in this matchup outside of popping a couple of barriers. Now, luckily for the Ezreal deck, popping a barrier still counts as targeting something with the card. Could see a Greenglade Caretaker come down here, giving this Fleet Feather Tracker the challenger it so desperately wants. Back to the matter at hand, though, in terms of the matchup. A stagnant life total on the side of ShangHigh. No healing coming out of this deck, so what you see is what you get. No elusive units to block out this Ezreal either. Only a couple copies of single combat going to be able to deal with that. There is a Judgment in the deck as well, however, with single combat and Judgment, you are reliant on the attack that you have, and that's where these freeze effects really start to get value. So an Ezreal coming down could actually push through a lot of pressure onto ShangHigh. There is an amount of challengers in the deck, as we see this Fleet Feather Tracker and a Swift Lancer in the hand of ShangHigh. Will almost certainly be a block onto this Avarosan Sentry, as there's no reason to take the damage and then challenge it with the Fleet Feather Tracker next turn to push through your Greenglade duos. Not going to have enough mana for a Riposte next turn, which could push through a lot of damage. The barrier triggering on the Greenglade Caretaker could push through about 10 damage, if my math serves correct. Single combat coming out, not going to be particularly useful. And there is a Bull Elnuk pickup on the side of Portia, which unfortunately will take away the dream troop of Elnuks that Gagongsing saw yesterday, hitting triple Bull Elnuk, no longer on the table. And unfortunately, a very awkward turn 3 here for both players, actually. ShangHigh just going to push through the 2 damage, as there is literally no other play he could make other than passing into an open board, which would make no sense. And on the side of Portia, we see something that this deck struggles with a little bit, where you load up on these 4 mana units, the Chumpwump and the Bull Elnuk. Also worth noting, not going to have the attack token on turn 5 is Portia, so this troop of Elnuks going to have a turn to be dealt with from ShangHigh. Will just be a pass from ShangHigh, is not wanting to commit a seemingly random get excited onto one of these Greenglade Caretakers. A Mystic Shot, much more reasonable removal spell. However, the Vanguard Bannerman might come down here just to kind of get these out of the Mystic Shot range, as well as it doesn't seem to be finding any other early drop minions. Could try and hold out for some Swiftwing Lancers and Radiant Guardians, but no, it's just going to play the Bannerman. No Ionia card on the top of his deck, as 2 of them are already in his hand in these Greenglade Caretakers. No Shens just yet, but pretty easy Bannerman coming down. A board full of 2/3s and this 4/4, rather threatening. This 4/4 coming through could get blocked by the Bannerman. Don't see a big reason for it not to. Going to make the way for some easy attacks on these caretakers. Although, could be wanting to save it for next turn. Trying to attack that with the Swiftwing Lancer instead, but having to be very cognizant of his life total is ShangHigh. Would like to see the Bannerman block here. It does push through a decent amount of damage onto Portia, who is not exerting a lot of pressure. Just one unit at a time. Going in for attacks and trading with everything but these Greenglade caretakers. But it looks like it is going to be a pass from ShangHigh, saying I don't really care about this 4 damage, which means it is probably going to be a Radiant Guardian coming down next turn if this Bannerman gets blocked. Perhaps a riposte onto a Greenglade caretaker if that is what gets blocked, but it's going to be a Get Excited onto one of these caretakers first, which is going to set him up for a Troop of Elnix next turn. Progress Day now off the table as the spell mana has been taken out of the bank. Going to turn it into a Get Excited. And that is, I believe, the first target for the Ezreal. That sounds extremely wrong in my head, but I think that's what it is. So it looks like Radiant Guardian going to be the pickup here. Unfortunately, if this Greenglade duo is the one that gets blocked, there's not enough mana on the side of ShangHigh for Riposte and the Radiant Guardian. So we're probably just going to see either a Swiftwing Lancer come down or just a single attack with the Vanguard Bannerman. A lot of interaction on the other side of the table. It's Portia, some removal spells in this Mystic Shot and Static Shock, as well as the Harsh Winds. And the Ezreal pickup, going to make it a little easier to win the game once all is said and done. And a Troop of Elnix, going to pull out 2 more Troop of Elnix. The RNG for Troop of Elnix across this tournament has been very, very kind to these players. No vanilla 3/3 coming down just yet. This is a 5-mana 9/9 swing. That is going to make things a lot harder for ShangHigh to chew through, not having mana for this riposte. However, it does tap out Portia. Not a whole lot he can actually do with it, though. Perhaps challenge a Chump Wump and then single combat one of the Elnix. Nope, just going to challenge one of the Elnix and then swing with the Bannerman. Could go for a single combat with this Bannerman onto one of the Elnix, perhaps saving it for the Ezreal, as that is one of the very few, very precious removal spells in this deck. And now Static Shock, Mystic Shot, going to have a pretty clean lineup onto the Swiftwing Lancer and Greenglade Caretaker, unless a riposte comes out to save it. And it looks like the single combat will be coming down from this Vanguard Bannerman onto a Troop of Elnix. The Bannerman coming through and slaughtering cows here in the Freljord. That's rude. I don't know why I said that about the Bull Elnuk. I'm sorry, Troop of Elnix, you're not a cow. You are an Elnuk, and you are a beautiful, majestic part of the Freljordian landscape. I apologize deeply. Please let me get some of this tournament's Troop of Elnuk RNG onto some of my future games. And a second Chump one picked up. These mushrooms are starting to clog the hand a little bit. They're definitely great once the Ezreal starts to come down, and they are very good in the control matchups to whittle down your opponent before this Ezreal comes down. But here, not really paying dividends. Could see a Bull Elnuk come down, although that would just get challenged by this Swiftwing Lancer. So almost certainly going to be a Static Shock onto that at some point relatively soon. So if some attacks come through, could be a block by this, which would turn on the Radiant Guardian, which could be the secret to success here for closing out the match on the side of ShangHigh. As a tough lifesteal unit, definitely something that's difficult for this Ezreal deck to deal with, especially with only a Harsh Winds in hand. And looking at this list, Flash Freeze, something that has been cut from a lot of the Ezreal lists, is cut from this one as well. So it's just Brittle Steel and Harsh Winds. Going to be difficult to keep this down for very long and stop ShangHigh from getting back a big life total. I believe I was talking about stagnant life totals before, and I had forgotten about Radiant Guardian. I always look for Ionia cards, specifically Kinku Lifeblade and spells, and consistently forget about Radiant Guardian. I apologize profusely to the viewers at home for forgetting about this, as it is a huge life swing and a very, very good card in this matchup. Picking up 2 copies is going to be very good, and it is just going to be the Mystic Shot down onto this Swiftwing Lancer. Going to see what pops out of it. Is it a Cythria? No, it's a Vanguard Bannerman. That's a huge pickup. It doesn't usually work out that well, but in this deck of Demacia, it could come up huge. Almost certainly going to get an Allegiance proc off the top, as 3 Shen are the only Ionia cards left in this deck. All 3 copies of Greenglade Caretaker have been seen so far, and that's just going to be an unsurprising pass from Portia. No answer to this Radiant Guardian at present, and a Fiora going to come down and be able to contest the Ezreal if it comes down anytime soon. However, 2 Static Shock and a Harsh Winds on the side of Portia means this Ezreal will be evolving relatively soon. And there goes the Bannerman with the expected result of a +1/+1 to the board. Not playing Fiora first, meaning he is valuing keeping up this riposte for the turn. We will see how this plays out for him. And it's just going to be a pass from Portia, rather unsurprisingly. A lot of spells in hand, a lot of things that need to get down. Unfortunately, not the mana to play more than 1 spell this turn. It's going to probably have to be Static Shock and potentially an Ezreal coming down if this Fiora doesn't get played here, or if the attacks come through first. I would assume the Fiora is not coming down, as would have made more sense to come down before the Bannerman, but sometimes you need to make suboptimal plays to see how your opponent is going to react. One of the interesting and intricate parts of Legend of Runeterra that we all love is this priority round sequence. Looks like it will be a pretty straightforward block here onto this Greenglade Protector, or this Greenglade Caretaker, and this Vanguard Bannerman from the Chump Wump and the Troop of Elnuks. Pushing through about 9 damage, if all goes well. Putting Portia down to 7, and ShangHigh back up to a very healthy 20. Could be the Harsh Winds here to protect his units and their life totals. Is going to be the Harsh Winds onto the Vanguard Bannerman and the Radiant Guardian, saying, I do not want you to gain that life. The Troop of Elnuks still going to have a clean trade onto this Greenglade Caretaker, unless the riposte is played. And if the riposte is played anywhere, then this Caretaker will trade with this Troop of Elnuks. Could also put it on the Caretaker. Could put it on the one that is going through at face. Could throw it just about anywhere, and it would be a reasonable play. Could go for the 3 lifesteal. Could go for a huge swing onto this Vanguard, or this Greenglade Caretaker. Actually, makes more sense to play it on the Radiant Guardian than the unblocked Caretaker, as it is the same amount of damage, but you get some lifesteal out of that one. Could play it to protect this Bannerman. Could play it to protect this Greenglade Caretaker, and it is going to protect the Bannerman, which is going to buff up the Caretakers. Going to be a trade onto that Troop of Elnuks, surviving onto this Chump Wump, and pushing through 5 damage still. Going to be 11-16 when all is said and done, and a tap out from pretty much both players. There could be a Mushroom coming down, unless, yeah, he wants to just bank that spell mana. It makes sense. And now on turn 8, feeling a little bit safer, has access to this Bull Elnuk Static Shock or 2 Static Shocks. Unfortunately, Brittle Steel not going to find a lot of value in this particular instance. It's really just the Fiora from the side of ShangHigh that it can hit, as we are approaching the point in the game where things with 3 toughness aren't coming down as often. Could be an Ezreal coming out. The only answer to this is a single combat, and one has already been used. A relatively safe read to say you don't have a second one. Unfortunately, not having a great answer for this Radiant Guardian presently. It probably will put him back up to 20. This Mystic Shot almost certainly going to go towards a unit trying to chew through the board of ShangHigh, as well as get some more targets down. Could play a Shroom and bank all the spell mana. ShangHigh, considering what to do, could play this Fiora first. Could play this Radiant Guardian if anything gets killed this turn. No Thermogenic Beam on the side of Portia, as it would be probably the best spell in this particular scenario to get through something. However, Prismatic Barrier on ShangHigh would invalidate that. So, just going to be an Ezreal attack. Going to poke ShangHigh down to 15. Get that fleeting Mystic Shot. Going to see where that goes. Could be the face. Could be a unit. Unit would make more sense, as with these high amount of Shrooms in hand, would probably like to upgrade this Ezreal relatively soon. Fleeting Mystic Shot going to come through. ShangHigh willing to just pass, knowing that there's almost no chance that Portia is not going to play this Mystic Shot on something, so he can play something once that Mystic Shot has been gotten out of his hand. But it looks like the Static Shock actually going to be what comes out. Just trying to upgrade this Ezreal as quickly as possible, deciding the Mystic Shot can wait for later, as he does still have 2 mana. And there's a Thermogenic Beam pickup. It's more targets onto the Ezreal. I have regrettably lost track. I think it is somewhere in the middle range, somewhere between 3 and 5 on this Ezreal. This Mystic Shot going to put it up to somewhere between 4 and 6. Trying to think, there was a Get Excited, a Harsh Winds, now this Static Shock, so definitely at least 5. This Mystic Shot could put it at 6, debating between that and the Thermogenic Beam, it seems. Is still the Prismatic Barrier on the side of ShangHigh if anything gets a little bit too low for his liking. And of course, does still have this Radiant Guardian to keep his life total up. No more freeze effects that are useful against that particular unit on the side of Portia, just this Brittle Steel, which will protect the Ezreal. And this Mystic Shot going to come onto the Fiora so that when it challenges the Ezreal, it does just die to this Brittle Steel. The second Radiant Guardian coming down, nothing having died this turn, but just valuing putting the damage out on board. It's going to be the Thermogenic Beam onto the Fiora just to tick this Ezreal up, and that is going to be the 8th spell target for the evolution of this Ezreal. Pretty heads up on the 0 mana Thermogenic Beam. And that is going to turn Portia's hand into a machine gun. The mana for a Progress Day if he can survive the turn. Currently looking at about 8 burst damage in the terms of these mushrooms and this Brittle Steel, but it is ShangHigh's turn to attack, and this could be lethal attacks coming down. A lot of large minions here. Could even have to block with the Ezreal, which would be as good as lethal unless he can quickly find another one. But this Fiora probably going to pull something to the side, make way for more Radiant Guardians to get through. It looks like the Fiora is going to challenge this Chump Wump, no longer having the ability to kill this Ezreal. It will be a -9 on the side of Portia if everything is said and done. Of course, that not going to be the case. Brittle Steel still can come down, as well as blocks from this Ezreal. But it will take both. As a Brittle Steel, even onto the Greenglade Caretaker, still 15 damage coming in at Portia. There is the Brittle Steel onto the Greenglade Caretaker. Gonna deal 2 damage over to ShangHigh as well. Could go for a Prismatic Barrier to try and push through lethal if this Ezreal does end up blocking the Radiant Guardian, as that would be 9 damage coming through unblocked, and then once the blocks are lined up, you can go for a Prismatic Barrier, which would give 2 attack to the Greenglade duo. And it's going to be the Progress Day. I got a little confused looking up at the hand of Portia, where the Progress Day cards had already been drawn, and I was just thinking, is he going to overdraw? But no, just the hand animations working out a little bit faster than the other animations, and with Portia completely tapped out, this Radiant, or this Prismatic Barrier should be lethal. ShangHigh checking the math a million times over, looking at this eye, once again reading the Greenglade Caretaker, trying to make sure that everything is going to work out as he anticipates. And that is going to do it here in game number 3. Going to be ShangHigh taking a quick 3-0 over Portia and advancing to the top 8 here in this tournament.